Let me just make sure I've got it all here. Okay, this is an extract from Dante, which I've adapted and mixed up a little bit and added my own kind of bits to it. I picked up Dante's Inferno at an airport and read it on holiday, and I thought, wow, this would make a good play. So what I've done is I've adapted various of the sins, gluttony, lust and wrath, and I put them into a modern production, which is at Leicester Square, the 8th to the 10th to the 12th of the month. This opening this Wednesday. This is the end of Dante's journey, where he actually realizes he's in hell himself. So I'll just read it as it is. So bitter is it, death is little more, but of the good to treat, which there I found, speak will I of the other things I saw there. I cannot well repeat how there I entered. So full was I of slumber at the moment, in which I had abandoned the true way. But after I had reached a mountain's foot, at that point where the valley terminated, which had with consternation pierced my heart, upward I looked and beheld its shoulders, vested already with that planet's rays, which leadeth others right by every road. Then was the fear a little quieted, that in my heart's lake had endured throughout the night, which I had passed as piteously as I knew, because I was standing at the very gates of hell.
Thank you, Nick. This is an incredibly talented man. Go and see the show. I mean, you know, I don't want to... remember, Dante ends up in heaven, right? He doesn't end up in hell, he's not heaven. But this is a consummate director of immense skills. I strongly recommend the play. We're in for something very exciting indeed.
Thank you very much.
Anything else you want to say, Nick, before you?
No, I've got one of the flyers I've slotted there, but I can leave that here.
Yeah, make sure we all get a flyer before.
All the information.
Yeah.
I can also recite a poem that I wrote many years ago myself,
Nick.
when I was an adolescent, because I had trouble meeting girls. So I wrote this poem all by myself when I was about 14, and this is from memory. Here we go. The seeds of spring, they fill the air. I'm not in love, why should I care? If I had a girlfriend, I'd try and keep her steady. I'll cut out her picture, put her on page 3.
As usual, I think the devil's in the detail. I've got to think about that one. We now need an actor. Oh, when I first met this man, he was nothing. But since then, he's just written this incredible book on Marshall Ney. I don't think I've ever read anything quite like it. Yes, White Tracks of Denmark is going to publish it as one of their British directors, I'm telling you. He is now an actor, up to my arse in actors. He was the founder of the Knights Templars recently. I've got the film, I can prove it. And you saw him in a flashback in the Akashic Records into the past, where he's got a beard, he's shaved it off today, don't try and hide your chin, please. And he's plunging a sword into some vicar's church. You can sort of feel the worry at the back where they're looking at the tiling. Very impressive indeed, and he's going to read some of his favourites to us this afternoon. My dear friend Ian Booth.
Just one or two short poems. I like poetry about London, old London especially, and the river that flows through the middle of it. Like all great cities, London exists because of the river. But although most of us are used to strolling along its banks, strangely, seemingly fortified banks, to and fro across its many bridges. I don't know if you've ever noticed how few people actually stop to contemplate the river itself. And those that do, we suspect they're thinking of suicide. Because the Thames is actually quite a dark river. Somewhere as it passes into central London, the spirit of the Thames becomes somehow malevolent. it creates atmosphere, and it's in these two poems that well, atmosphere is reflected. Grey Thames at flood, imbalanced swung, grey gulls scared, mewing overhead. A chill grey wind a requiem said, and over all the grey sky hung. Grey ghosts of memory paced with me, down to Mortlake slow I went. Grey brooding, grey presentiment, a grey and cheerless company. Then looking backward up the stream, within the bridge's sombre frame, of iron piers a vision came, that seemed the fabric of a dream. The little leaning strand where rest old barges when their work is done, a sudden glory of the sun lit like an island of the blest, ethereal in my wondering sight. It flashed from out a golden mist, to fire its scarlet roofs were kissed, its walls and rode a curve of light, to Mortlake then I took my way, with kindled soul and quickened will, a touch of sun brought God from ill, a gleam from God gave gold for grey. And the other poem is a symphony in yellow. Oscar Wilde. An omnibus across the bridge crawls like a yellow butterfly, and here and there, passer-by shows like a little restless midge. Big barges full of yellow hay, moored against the shadowy wharf, and like a yellow silken scarf, the thick fog hangs along the quay. The yellow leaves begin to fade and flutter from the temple elms, and at my feet the pale green Thames lies like a rod of rippled jade.
I think we need to turn to next students of mine, and then we'll get to Adrian. Sometimes I still teach, it's not often these days. I miss it immensely. Sometimes I meet wonderful young people with interest in poetry and verse, not often. I met young Daniele as a student of mine a couple of years ago, and he wants to read Nassimi Ganjari. He is the Chaucer of Persia, of Azerbaijan. They have a fight amongst themselves, actually, where he belongs to. He belongs to the world. His poetry is wiltingly beautiful. I'm told it really cannot be translated. I don't know, I'm sorry. We introduced him to the English-speaking world a couple of years ago, and Daniele is going to read something or other of his today. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniele Irandust.
Thanks, David. Well, I don't know what to say, so I'll just read this. Without you, neither world nor soul is needed. Once we have met, a parting is not needed. Purer your moist lips are than springs of heaven. A drink of living water is not needed. On my heart's throne, the grief you cause is sultan. Two sultans in one country are not needed. On my heart's all flowers are but thorns if you are absent. Without you, rose and basil are not needed. Come, you whose face is paradise to lovers, for paradise without you is not needed. For one who drinks the wine of lovers' meeting, the bane of parting is not so sorely needed. Nassimi shall not spurn a meeting with you, but do not leave his sight. This is not needed.
postponements being a lot longer. There are many shades of opinion in this world. I am not here to make your lives comfortable, I'm here to get you to think. Adrian Thurston is a friend and colleague of mine. Yes, a friend. He is an actor, he is a prolific writer. He has very strong views politically. I don't know quite if he's getting into them today. But we have a break shortly afterwards so we can all talk about what we think. He's going to read a set prepared piece. I don't want to introduce it. I'll let him do the whole thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian Thurston.
Hello everybody. I wrote a pamphlet, a political pamphlet a little while ago, because I believe that we need to indulge ourselves in citizenship. The title of it is In Pursuit of Reason, and I got that title from that famous Lady Diana interview that she had, when she was saying that she was harassed by the palace, the family, and that if anything happened to her, they would be to blame. And the interviewer said to her, "Why would they do such things to you?" And she's replied, "I have been in pursuit of reason." And that's the title of this political pamphlet, because we are treated very badly by the British government, because they don't recognise us as human beings, they recognise us as consumers. And so I've chosen to read an extract of it, which is titled Historically, and the historically element is, as I've said, it's to do with citizenship. The reliance and absolute fear of the sovereign and or of the state has its origins in darkest history, but so equally does genuine democracy. Genuine democracy involves every member of a nation in its political process, because the people are the state, whereas all other known systems, such as monarchy and the representative assembly systems, use systems of fear and reprisal to control their subjects and slaves. The ideal way that people have ruled themselves constructively, peacefully and happily in the past was by direct involvement in their own political affairs. And this is quite different from the tyranny of dictatorship or the flatulence of oligarchy or aristocracy and their heroes, the assembly representatives. These kinds of people have always self-justified, usually by pretending to be reasonable in order to gain the confidence of the people. These fraudulent groups of individuals start off life all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and are brought up as orators and taught that they are superior because they come from a superior class of education. They then find that they have the right kind of confidence to understand, learn, persuade, and then dictate to each other about their own brand of righteousness. These new modern aristocrats have then reassured themselves of their right to act in the public interest without popular public consent. If they turn out to be party politicians, they then hold elections every so often on the principle that no harm comes to those who consent. Hence, the resulting tyrants seem more concerned with their own freedoms to dominate than with anything people have to say, and the ordinary people have foolishly consented to their own abuse by voting for their abusers. Unfortunately, however, reliance on this type of abusive sovereign state will always lead to war on socio-sexual economic grounds because of the party political nature of its leadership. This is now a dangerous reality for everyone in the nuclear age. Terrorism is now the only way for some groups of disenfranchised people to make their points heard over the clamorous din of state propaganda. Many are seeking an opportunity to make a very big mushroom-shaped statement, which may not be argued nor contradicted or admitted. It is inevitable that they will succeed in the not-too-distant future, unless some very big changes are made to realign the course of what seems like inevitable history. We've been running out of natural resources to build and consume product for some time, and we're polluting our world with our questionable lifestyles, our internal combustion engines and our greedy excesses, and this is fast becoming a contributory factor to the continuing danger of war from the socio-sexual economic distress as mentioned earlier. This is because the government is state and not the people. The assembly representative system of political administration has always been a dangerous phenomenon in the hands of people who solely obey the doctrines of party politics, born out of party policies and their source of finance. These entities are always prepared and fairly easily persuaded to go to war on socio-sexual, economic or commercial grounds, or even sometimes on an electoral whim, in the hope and expectation of being victorious at the polls and so being re-elected for more deadly fun and power games with the ignorant people. Short memories and short-sightedness being the case, party politicians have naturally won elections with the help of a little propaganda here and there, a bit of secret manipulation behind the scenes, along with that questionable encouragement which engages people to mindlessly tender their votes for those whom they believe may easily be induced into promoting national euphoria. General elections have always ensured that ignorance will vote for any exhilarating feeling to continue, in spite of their worst fear. Now, to avoid the repeated history of this crazy situation, a fundamental change in the system of political administration has therefore been required for some time now. Party politicians have gotten away with this arrogant attitude toward the people and their schemed manipulative activities to produce the required effect many times. These actions are unlawful and have regularly been practiced by party politicians without the relevant prosecutions and convictions taking place. There is no reason why the farce of assembly representation shouldn't continue without anyone facing consequences for deceitful acts, unless the people intervene. A radical reform is required to make provision for the inclusion of many more forward-thinking, accommodating and reasonable people in the modern world. Nations require idealistic model individuals who stand as examples and or mentors for wards of state and others who may genuinely be encouraged to act in the best interests of all the people. Actually, it's the people themselves who must ultimately be formalised as these citizens and trained to act as virtuous, good individuals in their own state and in their own jurisdiction. They must represent the virtuous institution of citizenship and hold their own power undevolved by representation, and so be their own person. Others must become obsolete unless they can speak honestly, virtuously for themselves. History also shows us that these roles and other idealistic people must possess, history also shows us that these role models and other idealistic people must possess the education, prosperity, well-being, good character, and ultimately the heartfelt aspirations of the genuine good man and woman. This is because they must be the product of a new enlightened education of virtuous citizenship and idealism, such as will be outlined in the forthcoming book. This kind of state must produce virtuous leaders, and these leaders must aspire to idealism and the good for the purposes not only of self-fulfillment, but the fulfillment of the people by which the state exists. As I've already said, the people is the state, and that the institution of national virtuous citizenship should be made to reflect the natural aim of humanity, which I believe will save us from the annihilation as a species. That's historically. I think that since earlier on we've heard Anglo-Saxon, and we've been listening to other archaic languages and ideas, I thought about giving a rendition of the first part of the Canterbury Tales, the prologue of the Canterbury Tales, because it's now April, and that's how it starts. So I'll do about a page of it. In that April with his showers sought, the draught of March hath passed to the water, and bathed every vine in sweet liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. One Zephyrus, eke with his sweet breath, and spirit in every halt and height, the tonder cropis and the younger son, hath in the ram his half a course here own, and smaller fowlis, mac and melodia, that slipen all the nicht with open yea. So pricketh him natur in hier courage, than longen folk to go on pilgrimage, and palmeris for to seeken strangest rondis, to ferna always, couth in sundry rundes, and specially from every shear's end, of Engelong to Canterbury winder. The holy blissful martyr for to seg, set him of a holpen, one that they were a seg. I'll just leave it right.
Oh,
Thank you. Well, and then there's another ancient language which I know quite a lot about, which is classical Greek. And I thought that since this is an experimental affair, I might give you the first paragraph of the Iliad, which I think I'm going to be doing it in an Erasmus style, because like I've recently been in Greece and they don't understand it, and they can't make sense of what I'm saying, because it makes sense. And at the moment in Greece, they don't tend to make sense. They speak classical Greek in a modern way, and it's all jumbled up and it's all higgledy-piggledy in it. And although the words make sense to them, it doesn't make lyrical sense. And the way that the classical Greeks wrote poetry was very similar to Anglo-Saxon. And sometimes they'd rhyme in mid-sentence. But in effect, they used pace and alliteration more than anything else. And you can get all this just in the first paragraph, which is: Meinin na jeidet thea pele ja deo akileo oilo menein hei muiria kaios algetheke polas diptimois psuikas aidi proiapsen heroon dautos deloria tiuiche kuneisin oionoisi dette passidios deteleito oile exoideta proatarias tetein erisantea treideis teanax Andron kai Dios, Achilleos. And finally, what this is, it's like an amalgamation of my whole lifestyle and my whole understanding, and I've put it into something which I think is a discussion document. So if anybody wants to read any more of it, I've got some in my bag, and I'm just asking £3.50, which is how much it costs to photocopy it.
thank you, Adrian. Believe me, you've got to come back very, very often. We are having our break, our intermission. If you are not one of the readers and performers today, please get one of these. For a mere £5 entry, you get a free lunch. They are serving upstairs at the counter. Without one of these, you don't get it. Please avail yourself.